This past week's episode of AEW Dynamite was one of the more loaded shows so far this year, as AEW attempts to hit their stride going into the Revolution pay-per-view in 3 weeks' time. We had an MJF and CM Punk segment, FTR versus CM Punk and Jon Moxley, the debut of Limitless Keith Lee, an appearance by one of my favorite wrestlers in the world, the Switchblade, Jay White, a TBS title match, the Inner Circle's potential breakup, and a Texas death match for the AEW World title, which resulted in Adam Cole coming out and laying his claim to the AEW World Championship. Did I get everything? All of these things I've just listed are immensely exciting, and it feels like some major programs are going down right now, and believe me, they are. But there was something within one of those things on the list that has been the source of discussion and discourse for quite some time, and that is the inevitable but debatable face turn of Wardlow. The turn is inevitable. I think the fans and the company will unanimously agree that the face turn for Wardlow must happen at some stage in the future, while the debate will be on when exactly that should be. I have no doubt that the plan for Wardlow after turning face will be to launch him as one of the top babyface big men in the company, and he will likely be taking the place of someone like a Brian Cage, who was previously filling in one of those roles. From day one, it's been apparent in AEW that size is not really a massive factor when it comes to determining a wrestler's booking status and future in the company. In fact, one of the criticisms I see the most when it comes to AEW is the lack of size. Many wrestling fans, rightly or wrongly, will point out the fact that many of AEW's wrestlers are on the smaller side, and for some of those fans, it takes away some awe or believability. Regardless of your stance on size, I think most wrestling fans can agree that even on a roster where size is not a key factor, it can't hurt to have a couple of guys who fill the role of a large, dominating physical monster. Granted, most of the big men in AEW can move like a cruiserweight anyway, but purely from an aesthetic standpoint, my personal belief is that variety in builds can never hurt. You can have a guy as small as Darby Allin be a champion, or you could have a guy as big as Miro. So as I mentioned before, there are spots for bigger guys, and Wardlow is definitely a bigger guy. There's no questioning that, but the debate really comes down to one thing. When do you pull the trigger on Wardlow's face turn? Personally, the answer for me is really simple. Not now. I really don't care how far in the future you want to say, and yes, I do have a preferred timing, but all I know is that it shouldn't be happening now or in the next couple of months. I'm not saying this because I don't like Wardlow. I'm a massive fan, and I think he has a very high ceiling, but I think right now, Wardlow should be treated like an 18-hour slow-cooked beef. I know we're starving right now, we want to eat. The beef looks good, but it's only been 5 hours. Go eat some fruit or something. Wardlow should be taken out of the oven when Wardlow is finished cooking. And in wrestling terms, I guess that means when the full package of Wardlow is complete. Right now, Wardlow is getting over through a couple of avenues. The first one is simple enough: MJF's continued mistreatment of Wardlow. Whether it's through Wardlow helping MJF win with no credit or thank you, to him being scolded by MJF whenever he does something slightly wrong, or MJF's relationship with the rest of the Pinnacle being personal and friendly, but with Wardlow being professional and cold, it's pretty easy to see how crowds have been getting on the Green Machine's side. The other way is through the subtle teasing of his face turn and the cracks that are forming in Wardlow's relationship with MJF. Once again, a very basic way of getting a face turn. The crowd is at this stage basically egging on Wardlow, or in some cases begging him to turn face and screw his employer over. People want to see MJF get screwed so badly that they would cheer whoever would be in a position to do so. And lastly is Wardlow's in-ring squash matches. Squash matches can be extremely effective, and this situation is one of them for two main reasons. Wardlow comes out with Shawn Spears, who the crowd hates. Shawn tries taking the spotlight away from Wardlow, but also gets upset when Wardlow tunes up the band for the Powerbomb Symphony, which is the second reason. The crowd have slowly but surely been warming up and counting along with Wardlow's Powerbomb Symphony, and a big reason for that is because of Shawn Spears. Don't underestimate that. Shawn is a direct representation of MJF's thoughts, feelings, and reactions. So when the crowd sees Shawn shaking his head or telling Wardlow to stop, the crowd automatically wants the opposite to happen, which in turn is more powerbombs to annoy Shawn Spears and in turn MJF. It's a strange dynamic. Like a group of barbarians, we're all going crazy for the continued destruction of a poor, helpless little prey, while a heel is trying to get the predator to stop the unnecessary damage and put the kill away. It feels a bit backwards, but it works so well. Between MJF's mistreatment, the subtle face turn opportunities, and Wardlow's in-ring action, we're still not really all the way there. These are all fantastic steps, and the face turn looks so good right now in theory, but the result we want after the face turn is what people should be focusing on right now. We don't want this to be like fireworks where the turn happens, we're all super excited, but the moment ends and there's nothing left afterwards. What we want after is a sustained long-term burn. We want the build-up of the turn to last forever. We want Wardlow to end up as a made man. If he turns face now, I don't think we get the long-term stability for Wardlow that we all want. I could be very wrong about this, but I see it falling flat very quickly. You might be asking, well, what else is there to do? And my simple answer would be to just wait, but I do think there are two main factors that need addressing and planning out before the turn eventuates. First and foremost, you need to pick a time to do the turn. I know that's an obvious thing to say, but when you dig a little deeper, things begin to get slightly more complex. When it comes to timing, when are you screwing MJF over? What are you costing him? Ideally for me, it's the AEW World title. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but that is the most ideal situation in my mind. You would be costing MJF the most important thing in his career that he's ever gotten. But potentially more important than that is once Wardlow is flying solo, what is there for him to do? Easily enough, he can feud with MJF straight after. Maybe MJF brings a new heavy into the Pinnacle for Wardlow to take out before he gets his hands on the man who's disrespected him for so long. After that feud, you could launch Wardlow into a program for the TNT title. So you have to make sure that the champion at the time makes sense too. So timing really is a lot more complex than you would originally think. The second thing that needs addressing, along with the timing of the turn, is the question of who exactly is Wardlow. Why should I care about Wardlow if he's not working for or screwing over MJF? After he's turned and the embers of the feud with MJF are long since burned out, why do I still care about him? Why did he go through all of that? Why did he put up with MJF for so long? I think that story can start to get told right now. Of course, MJF pays Wardlow's checks, but he's also an active member of the AEW roster, which we all know. So why is that extra money so important to him? I think a genius way of writing it, and I say genius because I thought of it, and I am a genius, is for Wardlow to be doing all this for his family, or a specific family member. Give us some backstory on War Dog. Maybe he comes from a really poor family that he now feels responsible for providing for. Maybe he has a family member who is sick, or a father who left his family high and dry when they were young and they've had to fight ever since, and MJF's checks are what's eventually helping out these people. If Wardlow is going to be a full-on face after his turn, you have to make the crowd see him as a hero, so give us that backstory. Not only would it make the crowd love him more for what he's doing and what he's putting himself through, but it would also make us feel like he'll never turn because of that fact. And eventually, that will make his turn so much more impactful. When he does turn, we'll know how much it means to him to be throwing away that extra money. It adds a few layers into the story and also puts a little bit more on the line. It won't just be Wardlow getting irritated time after time and him cracking, even though that's already a pretty good story in amongst itself. It will be him giving up the easy cash of being MJF's bodyguard and dealing with all of that to instead try and become the top guy in wrestling, to win titles and get the extra winner's bonus, the champion's bonus, and the pay-per-view purse. He'd be taking a leap of faith. He'd be taking a bet on himself and he'd be leaving it all on the line. Wardlow would be throwing away his miserable life and the guarantee of helping his family with that dirty money and take a chance at success, at happiness and fulfillment in the hope that he can still provide for those he loves the most. And really, who's ever going to boo that? He's also kind of hard to boo because he's pretty hot, so let me know what your thoughts are on Wardlow. I'm getting a little scared that AEW may pull this trigger sooner rather than later. If MJF and CM Punk have a rematch at Revolution, I could see a similar spot happening in that match as the original, where Wardlow comes out to help, but in fact ends up crossing MJF. I don't want to see it so soon, but we'll see what Tony Khan has up his sleeve. My idea of it being for his family is only one of many. I'm sure you could find a lot of other stories. That's just the one that popped up into my mind, and that's probably what would make me care about Wardlow after the turn. Because right now, I already know. After the turn and after the feud with MJF, Wardlow just gets shuffled in with the rest of the deck that is AEW's talented roster. Right now, I think he gets lost in that shuffle. If you enjoyed today's video, leave a like on it so it does a little bit better in the algorithm, and I'll see you boys in the comments. See ya!